Hey, welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'm Charlie Paparelli. I'm so glad that you're here. And that thunder you hear in the background is at my guest house. So he's got a little thunderstorm going through, but I think that just shows the power of God behind my guest, which I'm very excited about. But I have been an angel investor here in the Greater Atlanta area. I've been doing it for over 25 years. And during that time, I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs that have shown me how to start businesses from scratch and to grow them into valuable enterprises. And that's what this show is really all about, is to invite entrepreneurs who have started great organizations and grown them into great companies. And if you don't want to miss one of these episodes, please sign up at paparelli.com, submit your email, and as a benefit, not only will you be alerted to when the show comes out on Fridays, but you'll also get, as an added benefit, you'll get my Tuesday morning blogs that I get out there. And what we're about here is just really telling stories. I really want to know from my guests, how did you do it? And my guest today is Bill Bolling. Bill is the founder of the Atlanta Community Food Bank. He is also the founder of this community food bank concept nationally. He's the go-to entrepreneur for matching food and the poor. He retired after leading the Atlanta Community Food Bank for 36 years, and we're going to get into that. And he's board member now at the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation. And Arthur Blank, of course, is the owner of our soccer team here in Atlanta, but he's also the owner of the Atlanta Falcons. He's the former founder of Home Depot, and he's a big community servant and works very closely with Bill. Bill is also the man, I think, that is most connected to leaders passionate about changing the plight of the poor here in Atlanta and nationally. He knows everybody from the poor all the way up through billionaires, including all those who are leading and serving the poor. He's still inventing, he's still thinking, and he's still serving. He goes deep in solving problems. That's how I see Bill. And he's not only visionary, but he's practical. But most importantly, he's community-centered. He brings everybody with him, and that's what has made him so successful. He's a friend whom I hold in very high regard because I see him as the servant in the Atlanta community and touches everybody's hearts. Today's topic is, how did food change your life and the lives of the poor? Welcome, Bill, and thanks for sharing with me your experience with me and also with my entrepreneurial audience. I am so glad that you're here.
Well, thanks, Charlie. I hope I can live up to that introduction. Anyway.
Well, I'm just, it was funny. I went to your LinkedIn page, looking to see, to get a little bit more in depth on you, a little bit more formal beyond my note. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. It says Bill Bolling. Hello. What does it say?
Well, I just joined a couple of months ago. I somehow people find me without Facebook and LinkedIn, so I thought, why get on there?
I guess being, in the technology community, I just expect everybody's going to be on this thing.
Well, I probably should be, but I haven't.
Yeah, I get it. So what are you up to these days?
Oh my goodness.
You're retired, I figured you'd just be kind of sitting around, riding your bike, doing nothing down there in Decatur.
I'm glad you didn't interview my wife for this interview because she thought I was actually going to retire after 40 years. What I would say is having worked in helping start, I wasn't the founder, but co-founder of food banking and Feeding America, and certainly the food bank here in Atlanta and 8 food banks here in Georgia. At the point that I was ending my tenure, we were at the height of our influence, the height of our work. Everything was going great. Even the board had done a survey and realized I was just paying a third of what other people would make. That was on me, not them. But, I left the food bank for one reason. I realized that I had a bank full of social capital.
Okay.
And I don't know if your listeners know that term. We can talk about it. But having a bank full of social capital, I thought, it's just like everything else. Can't take it with me. I need to spend it. And really, the social capital I'm talking about is very much like the introduction. I've worked across race, religion, geography, haves, have-nots, rich and poor, and I'm trusted by a lot of folks. And I also just got 40 years of experience under my belt, and I thought, well, if somebody else can run the food bank, I'm pretty uniquely qualified to spend that capital. So that's really what I've done.
But when did you come up with that? When did that hit you, that you had all this social capital? One of the things that I always remembered, way back when I was younger, building a career, and now here I am in my late 60s, so I have a different view of it. But there was this fellow named Arm & Hammer, and he ran Arm & Hammer Inc., right? And he was like 84 years old, and he was still the CEO, founder of Arm & Hammer. Did it for, 60 years. And here you are, the founder of this food bank, just the concept of food banks. How do you get to a point where you can see yourself as anything other than that? And then to say, well, like you made a comment very casually here. You said somebody else could run the food bank. And I'm like, oh, really? There's not many entrepreneurs that think that way, ever. That's in technology or any nonprofit that I know. Churches included. I'm the pastor. Yeah. I founded it, and there's nobody that can replace me. How did you come to that? That's so unusual.
Well, one thing you got to remember is we can all be replaced. So let's get that off the table.
Yeah, but nobody really believes that. We only say that.
Well, it took 2 years to leave. So, it's not, you don't walk out one day. You have to do that well, because the food bank is part of my legacy, right? So I want the person who follows me to do as well or better than me, because that says I was a good leader and I turned over an initiative and it thrived.
Yeah, but
I think that's a real mark. That's a real mark of a leader.
But I'm earlier than that. At some point you came to a conclusion. You're telling me one is nobody pushed you out.
No, I had to extricate myself.
Exactly. So everybody say, no, Bill, you're the guy. So, right. And then there's this whole entrepreneur founder thing, which is I am the guy. And yet you sit here and say, I had this aha, which is I have all this social capital and I really need to do something with it. Can you tell me a little bit about how that thinking sort of came along? And I'm sure it was long before you decided you were going to retire.
Oh, Charlie, you know how whether you're running the food bank is a $50 million company, but it started in the basement of a church. I was street ministry for 4 years, actually 6 years, working with the homeless back in the 70s. The idea of the food bank was, let me just get some more churches doing this work. See, Mike, if you read a little bit of Matthew, you would get that's part of our responsibility, as people of faith. But I would say,
what does it say in Matthew? What do you mean when you read a little bit of Matthew? What do you read in Matthew?
Well, you can read Matthew 25, there's any number of verses that would inform us what Jesus calls us to do. But Let me just make the point that I always thought of the food bank as a base to work from. Okay. So I was involved in many things because I had that base. We executed well. We were best in class food bank, one of the best in class in the country. But let's just be very clear. One person never does all that. I would take responsibility and some credit for building great teams, for getting the right fit for the right people in the right job, for creating the right mission that you can measure yourself against. We have a term in food banking, things that get counted, get done. Well, when we started food banking, some of your listeners, they may read this in the history books, we didn't have UPC codes back then. We didn't scan things, right? So it was hard to keep track of that inventory. So the idea was a simple idea. There's surplus food, what they call shrinkage in the industry, and there's people in need. But the real work, and this is really in essence what I would say, my work was not moving food. My work was around transformation. That's my work. If you say, what is my life's work? I'm in the transformation business. And you would say, in 1978, when I had this idea and I went to the food industry, they laughed me out of the office. It's like, we're not going to give you food. What I had to figure out is I had to make it a good business proposition. And you need to teach me the grocery business, right? I had to figure out tax laws and get those changed, liability laws and get those changed. I had to go to the experts and figure out logistics about how to move and account for food. But for me, who didn't come at it from so much business, but from my call in ministry, what I was interested in is how is that meal going to transform a life? Not how many pounds went out the door. And we measure that too, and it's very important.
Well, you're hitting.
Because you've got to look at the value proposition. But what I want to know is if I can get the food to you in a congregation or an individual that has that call to feed the hungry, I'm interested in how we use that food in engaging people. And even going back to our mission, different than other food banks, our mission was to engage, educate, and empower the community. Not me, not the food bank, not the food industry, the community to fight hunger. Okay? Wow. So the engagement piece was, I've got an engagement tool. I've got the food.
Well, I got to roll back a little bit here, take me back. I've always wondered why the hungry, why the poor, why the hungry, why food with Bill. Take me back. Were you born and take me back to your youth? Okay.
Yeah.
Or as they say in my cousin Vinny, your youth. Okay. When you were a youth. Okay. So what is where did you grow up? I didn't know where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in North Carolina.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Small town. I finally came to Georgia for graduate school.
What'd your dad do?
Well, my birth dad was a business person, but he died when I was 6 years old.
Okay.
And he was an alcoholic, wonderful guy. Everybody loved him, but a binge drinker, and didn't drink every day. But when he started drinking, my childhood was, let's get out of the house.
And you remember that even at 5, 6 years old?
Well, those are deep impressions, when that happens. And it was a very prominent family in Winston-Salem. I mean, my mother I can talk about where she came from and where I grew up. But,
yeah.
I grew up my first 6 years of, quite prominent. My grandmother was a business leader in the 50s.
Wow.
In Winston-Salem. And my father, my uncle, my grandfather, they owned a lot of real estate. But he suddenly died on one of his vendors.
Okay.
Just there and gone the next day. And very quickly, my mother moved back home. Well, it wasn't but 30 miles away.
Okay.
In a little town called Denton, North Carolina. It had about 800 people, 2 stoplights, one of those.
Were you an only child?
And No, I had a sister, and then my mother remarried, 6 or 7 years later, and they had a child, so I had a brother. And something I didn't know until I left home, Charlie, my second father, we never called him stepfather, never thought about it that way,
right?
Was just an absolutely wonderful man. I mean, we just brought him into the family, and there was not a bump in the road. So I didn't know until I left home that didn't go well for some kids.
That what? I missed what you said. I didn't know until I left home. What?
That didn't go well in some families, when you have a step
I
parent,
see.
right? For me, it was seamless, and I had a wonderful mentor. But another thing about growing up in a small town like that, my mother was a nurse. It's kind of the doctor for that little town. Everybody looked to her. My grandfather ran a sawmill, but when we came home, moved in with my grandparents, he sold that business and became the manager of this little town. Huh. Right? So he was He was the policeman, the dog catcher, the fireman, and
And this is
figured out
Denton,
where the
North
potholes were.
Carolina?
Denton, North Carolina, great little town. And everybody there worked in furniture or the hosiery mill, or they farmed. So, I was just, man, I had the best childhood ever because my grandfather, who I thought was 10 feet tall, our house, his house, and the little kitchen was half as big as the room behind me. Everybody, in town came over there to drink coffee and eat grandma's apple pie. So
you grew up in the center of community. I mean, he was a community servant, your grandfather, obviously. He did everything.
He did. I'll give you another example. We had a very small farm, grew our own food and canned and froze and, had animals, slaughtered them. He would go out and lease more land. He'd go out and lease another 30 acres. I remember my grandmother she'd such, why are you doing that? And we would grow corn, beans, and watermelon. We would harvest it, put it on the truck, and ride around town full of produce. And he'd say, Billy, go knock on their door. And I'd go knock on their door, and they'd come out, and they'd just shop off the truck for free. Because, Ben Carroll was there with whatever you needed. That was the first food banker I ever met.
How about that?
Because there was, as God promises us, there is enough.
Huh.
Right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely. He's a God of abundance, not a God of scarcity. Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely. So I learned that very early. I even had my own tractor by the time I was 12 years old.
What was it like knocking when your grandfather said, "Hey, Billy, go over there and start knocking on those doors"? What did you think? You remember?
I didn't think anything. That's just what we did. I didn't know the difference. You just look back later and think, wow, that was. But, growing up in a community where everybody was kinfolk or kin to somebody else, and, you'd sit around at the house at night just telling stories. I was the kid who, instead of going out and play, would sit in the corner of the room and listen to the adults tell stories.
Really?
Right? So that, I think that set me on a path.
Why do you think that you had, as you look back, why was that interesting to you? Listening to the adults as opposed to saying, oh, this is boring like most kids do and go running out and doing whatever they're going to do with their friends. Mostly to no good, usually.
Well, growing up, they let you out in the morning, you come back at night,
Right.
You were on your own pretty much.
That's what I did.
Yeah, most of us did, unless they live in the city. But I was blessed to grow up in that kind of environment. I remember my grandfather, called me up after school and say, Aunt Pally or Mildred, from the church, go over and plow her garden, and, I had control of the family tractor. I'm the kid who went to Little League practice on a tractor instead of a bicycle, right?
Yeah.
But, that taught me, I just always worked. And when my father came into our life, he made brooms, just a little broom factory. I worked every afternoon, Saturdays after Friday night ball game. I mean, you're expected to work in my family. So having a strong work ethic has served me well because it doesn't seem like a burden.
Strong work ethic also brings you into being with more adults and being with children, if you will. Right.
Yeah, I had a lot of responsibility.
Uh-huh.
And we may touch on this a little bit later, Charlie, but as a child or even a young adult, and I bet some of your listeners can relate to this, that you have guides and mentors, coaches in your life who see something in you before you know it about yourself.
That's right.
So they would say, you can do this. And I thought, I have no idea how to do that. But if you think I can do it, then I'm, by God, going to do it, right? And I can tell you, even today, I get responsibilities that I think, my goodness, I mean, can I really step up to that? But that kind of people believing in you, betting on you. I mean, when you describe yourself as an investor, I would guess, just like foundations, the smart foundations, they're not investing in the company or even the idea. They're investing in people,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And that's, all smart foundations are investing in people. So
you bring up
to
a
grow
good point.
into that person.
I do see that with a lot of interviews that I do of successful people, is that other people saw something in them before they even saw it in themselves. And I ask, how did they see that? What did they see? And no one really has an answer for it. They just saw it. I don't know. They just kind of picked me out of the crowd. I don't know if you know Blake Patton of Tech Square Ventures, but Blake
Right.
was a freshman on the swim. This happened just last week. I was interviewing him. He was a freshman on the swim team at Georgia Tech. And the president of Georgia Tech comes by the swim team just to say hello, I guess. And he asked Blake, he says, "So what do you think about being a student here at Georgia Tech?" And Blake said, "I don't like it." And he said, he said, he said, "I want to have lunch with you. Come to my office at some point." So his secretary set up this whole lunch thing, and he went. Next thing you know, he's on a advisory board with the likes of Andrew Young, as a 19-year-old at Georgia Tech. And I said, "What did this president see in you?" He goes, "I don't know. We talked at lunch. I don't know what I even said, but he invited me to be on that board." And it was, where did that come from, right? And that's his career.
Any of us in that position are blessed.
Yeah.
Well, I know
he's another North Carolina guy. Maybe it's all these North Carolina guys.
I always think the air is different up there in North Carolina. But, I remember at 16, my father and his brother, we made industrial brooms and sold them, all over North and South Carolina at hosiery mills and so forth. 16, the whole week's work, and we have to get paid for that week. He would send me to South Carolina to deliver the brooms. And we didn't have GPS or cell phones. Now, you'd have to stop on the side of the road, and I'd describe, "Here's where I think I am, Dad." And he'd say, "Well, look around. What do you see?" And, but he trusted me.
Yeah.
And I think when people trust you, you grow in trusting yourself.
Ah, that's true. That's a great insight.
Yeah.
That's a great insight. Do you have a story, too, about where you said, "I used to sit around and listen to my grandfather and the other adults"? Do you have some story that you kind of remember? That you kind of you say, "God, that just, sort of like you even remember where you were sort of sitting when they were sitting there in the living room or wherever they were."
Well, I don't know if I can.
They were talking,
I don't know if I can pull one of them out, Charlie, but here's one of the things that in small towns.
Yeah.
You're talking about people's health, what's their work, did they show up at church on Sunday, those kind of things. But I can remember like it was yesterday that my grandfather and I would get in his pickup truck or sometimes his old Jeep and go out in the country to find old cemeteries, because they were country churches that maybe had been abandoned, but there's a cemetery around. I don't know if that was just a hobby of his. But
why did he do it?
Well, it has to do with our roots and who we are, where we came from, and the Healing Springs Baptist Church down there by the river.
Uh-huh.
And I can remember that very clearly. I even like to hang out in cemeteries. I had a job in school mowing the cemetery, and we didn't have riding mowers back then. You had to mow around every one of those tombstones. But I just remember honoring who we are, where we came from, right? Our people. And we were
that was your grandfather did this, you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you remember first time he said, "We're going to go to a cemetery"? As a kid, you must have been like, "We're going to what?"
I'd go with him anywhere. If there was a fire in town, he would wake me up at 2:00 in the morning so I could go with him fight the fire. I mean, that's just what we did.
That's being
So,
close to your grandfather.
well, he stepped up to that. And then, of course, a father came into my life.
Yeah.
And they work very closely together. But to me, it shows the power of mentors and
Yeah.
teachers, and that, and this is what I've worked on, talking about food being a transformational tool. Tools, just the engagement. The engagement's where the conversation starts happening, right? And to have an adult to believe in you, little boy lost his father living in a small town. I had found out later I had some learning disabilities, which I overcame. But to have family and extended family believe in you and hold you up and give you responsibility, that set me on a track for my life.
Wow. That has such an impact on me because I don't know that I had a lot of that early in my childhood. It was more doubting than, so I had to sort of prove myself. I sort of went on this path that I'm going to prove that I should be trusted. I prove that I can do it and that creates a different person than someone who's trusted. Okay.
Well, I don't know that it creates a different person, but it's a different path to get to your full realization.
But the other thing that you bring up by saying this is I'm just this week where Kathy and I, my daughter and her husband went away for a week. And we had the opportunity where we're watching our grandchildren, two of our grandchildren. And that was the thought. One of the things I never understood is how to be a grandfather, right? I mean, grandfather is not a role you choose. It's like the father-in-law role. You don't choose it. It's thrust upon you. Someone else has made the decision, right? We made the decision to become husbands. We made the decision to become fathers. But this son-in-law thing, this father-in-law thing, and this grandfather. And I think as a grandfather, spending time with my grandchildren, I'm thinking that is what I have to do, is I have to trust them. I have to love them. I have to show that I'm confident in them, I can see the things they don't see in them, and do it at a rate that they can sort of accept it, if you will, it's
well, it's a great role, Charlie, because you can give them back and they can discipline the kids. You just love them up all weekend, right?
But it is confusing. I mean, especially if you had a grandfather. I didn't have grandfathers in my life. So I
had three of them.
Yeah, so I didn't have that. So you had a grandfather. You said, how do you be a grandfather? And you'd say, I know exactly how to be a grandfather. Let me tell you, I had this great and you can go on from there. But if you don't have that role model, it's like growing up and trying to be a father, having never really had a father. It's hard to do.
I think when I say we're blessed to have parents, grandparents, ministers, people that believe in it, that really is a blessing because it gives us a kind of a leap forward. Yeah.
There's so many people that just flat out don't have that. So then what happens is you get to sort of 18. I mean, did you go to college? What happens at that point? Did you become the mayor of Denton, North Carolina, or?
No, I think maybe 12, 13 years old, I knew these are great people, but I'm not going to live in a small town. I knew I wanted to see the world. I was not college
what do you mean you
material.
Knew? How did you know that?
I don't know. I just looked around that small town and thought there's a bigger world out there. And I wanted to investigate. But
what's that Christmas story favorite that we all watch?
Which one?
The one where he's a mortgage banker guy. I'm just drawing a blank.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he wants to see the world. He has these big thoughts, and he keeps getting pulled back into this small town. But he changes everybody's life. But you actually decided, okay, I'm going to go see the world.
Well, I left home at 17, joined the service.
Wow.
And
what branch did you join?
Air Force, because I had two uncles in the Air Force.
Okay.
I really respected them, but I was not college material, Charlie. They kind of said it's time for you to leave high school now and go do something else. Right. So I joined the Air Force. That's my way out. And I literally was not accepted to any colleges.
Why do you say you weren't college material? Academics just weren't your thing?
They weren't at that stage of my life.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I learned later, it's a whole story around that I had certain limitations or challenges in that I don't memorize well.
Okay.
And when we were growing up, it was all memorization. It wasn't go find the answer. It was memorize the answer. I just didn't do well. I didn't do well in the Air Force until the major finally brought me in and said, hell, you're teaching the class. Let me just give you the sergeant rank, because I couldn't pass the test, but I was teaching it. But, that was, I learned to work on teams. I had diversity for the first time.
How did you get chosen to teach a class? Somebody in the Air Force who saw something in you didn't see either?
Well, it just needed to be done. I went to school for a year in the Air Force. And this is 1965, 1966. Okay. There's a war going on. And I joined. I wanted to go fight for the country. But I went to school 6 days a week, 6 hours a day. It's like graduate school in airborne navigation. I worked on airplanes. And then got sent to learn how to work on the plane, and then got sent to Southeast Asia, Vietnam and Philippines, and Taiwan. So you would have new people come in after being trained, and they would, land at the base, and they had to be trained. I was already running teams by then, because I was a good worker.
You were what, 18?
Well, I was probably 19 by then.
19? Oh, okay. Well, then it's totally understandable. All right.
Well, I was out when I was 20. I already had my 4 years in. But a great experience of, we send very young, undeveloped people into wars. You don't know very much, but one thing you do is you learn how to take orders, you learn how to run teams, you're mission centered. That sets you up for life.
Mm.
I'm a big proponent of everybody should serve a year or two in the military or work in a hospital or prison or somewhere. Something that is teaching you about life,
right,
and about service, before you hit it rich or whatever you're going to do.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. I always admired the Israelis, that you do 2 years minimum service before you can go on to college or whatever. I always thought that was a great way to make you an official part of serving the community, if you will, right?
And everybody's got to do it, rich and poor.
You learn about honoring authority and how authority works. You learn about systems and how they work. You learn about working in teams. You learn how else do you learn that stuff?
I'll tell you a funny story.
Join a fraternity in college. Coming right out of high school. Is that the way you learn it? One way.
They sent me I had never flown on an airplane. I'd only been out of the state once with my grandparents to go visit my aunt in Texas. And, we drove there in an unair conditioned car. But so you go to Charlotte, get your head shaved, strip you down, and it takes a couple of days. They send you to Lackland in Texas. And I'd been up for a couple of days. They keep you up, no sleep. And I remember getting to the base, and they put us on a bus, and they take us to a barracks. And I'm Mr. Smartass on the bus, said, when I get in there, I'm going to sleep. Man, I ain't slept in 2 days. And I get off the bus, and there's a little TI training instructor, about 4'8". He ended up being a Filipino, and I went to the Philippines. And I told him I needed some sleep. I was up for 2 more days after. Good God, I thought I was going to die. But, you learn you're not the big deal here. You're on a team. There's a mission. We're going to get you in shape.
And that's also where you met men from other other states too, right? I mean, from all over the United States, as opposed to everybody being from Denton, North Carolina.
Yeah, the people downstairs in the barracks were from the South, and upstairs was from New Jersey and New York. We used just to fight on the steps because of where we're from. But I also grew up in a second.
Was it still the Confederates versus the Yankees? Is that what was happening?
Yeah, pretty much back then. This is 1965.
I love it.
I also grew up in a segregated. My high school integrated after I left, after I graduated. So, wow, for the first time, I'm with black folks and with Italians and with New Yorkers. And, I mean, it's just a big, wide world. You're scared to death, and what they do is say, don't worry about that. Focus on showing up and, getting in shape. So, great experience.
So was it hard to deal with this sort of integration, both culturally and also race-wise? You follow me? I mean, if you're all Southerners, white Southerners hanging out in Denton, and then all of a sudden Yankees show up. I mean, that's a whole different. I mean, they talk so weird, and they're so rude, right? They show no respect for Southerners. They think we're all idiots. And then you got blacks are all part, you're standing arm in arm with blacks now as part of the whole community here, of the team, if you will, not even community.
Yeah.
How did that, as a 17-year-old, what do you remember from that?
I remember being scared to death,
okay.
Because I'm out of my element. I'm out of control. That's the point of going through basic training, to get you out of your control. I think I was at that point, I was really wanting to meet people different than myself.
Okay.
I was curious, and I'm not sure many of my classmates could have claimed that. And certainly, we were in our traditional roles, but, I think even as I go back and, growing up in the church, we were three doors, there was the church, the cemetery, the American Legion hut, our house, right? So even growing up in the church, I was that kid who would ask inappropriate questions, or why is it this way? A lot of why questions.
Right.
That was not encouraged at that point, and sometimes is not encouraged today. But I think that was kind of my way of learning, to ask.
Well, you've never stopped doing that. Part of it must have been the influence of your grandfather. He must have entertained.
Well, grandfather,
encouraged you to ask why questions and things. He didn't shut you down. He trusted you and respected you even when you were a young man.
Well, and I would say my father was part of that. What you'd call my stepfather, but my father.
Yeah, right.
Just a wonderful man. And, one thing he taught me is I had to work. I had to work after school, but he taught me I work by the piece. So if I had to bunch up a dozen brooms or cut strings off or, load or unload the truck, he paid me by the item. Now, he trusted me to do the counting, but he didn't just pay me for showing up.
So
he paid me for getting the job done. It's piecework.
Yeah, right? I got it. Okay.
That's great training.
That is pure productivity. That's what it is, right? It's not, I've been here for 3 hours, you owe me $30, right? There was none of that.
My mother, who, all my cousins came to her for counseling. I never could understand why they would come to her, because I wouldn't go to her. But she was kind of the nurse doctor. I mean, everybody got sick, came to our house. My mother would figure out what it was. Of course, she never gave us more than an aspirin. I mean,
but I just can't get over how you were in the center. That household of yours was the center of the Denton community. That was very unusual, very unusual, to grow up. And I don't think I've talked to anybody that had that kind of background.
Well, I was very fortunate.
Yeah. So what happened when you finally get out of the Air Force? Where do you go then? Now it's like, I know how to do aerial navigation. What do you do?
Yeah, I came down here.
Okay.
Well, there's a great story around that one too, Charlie.
Okay.
one, I'd been out of the country for 2 years, and 67 to 69, I'm in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and I missed a lot. There's a lot going on in those years. And I came back thinking I got a lot of catching up to do here, which is partying and meeting girls and all that stuff.
Oh, that was the catching up? Okay.
Yeah, I had a lot of catching up.
Where were you in the Southeast? You were in the Philippines? Is that where you were stationed? Or were you in country?
I was I worked with the planes. So I had Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam. In my case, we would fly in country, maybe work for a month. And then the planes would need to come out and get overhauled,
I see. Okay.
new equipment. So you were in and out.
Okay.
You had different missions.
Mm-hmm.
So
then you
I had just left. I just had left Saigon. I think 2 days before Tet offensive happened, where they overran Tan Son Nhut base. I mean, you were on close calls that way. But you asked after I came home. Nobody in our family had gone to college, and I didn't know that my parents had saved up for that. I mean, we didn't talk about it. I left home, and when I came, I wanted to do it on my own. So one of the things that I just really regret is I did not let my parents help me go to college. I think twice over 6 years, I got a couple of $1,000s from them, but I was just so hard-headed, I'll do this on my own. But I started out in community college because I was not confident in my
Did you come back to Denton?
Well, I came back to Lexington, the next little town.
Okay.
Same county. Lexington is up Highway 85 north of Salisbury.
Okay.
Just one of the, maybe it had 30,000 people. Stayed there a month, 6 weeks, and then went to Charlotte. And I started community college because I could get the GI Bill. And the GI Bill plus working, started cleaning carpets and stuff like that, could pay the rent.
Yeah.
So I gained confidence that I could figure out how to get good grades and go to college and have my fun.
Why college, Why even wanting to go to college? Since you came out.
Oh, yeah. I didn't tell you the story. I came home and I came to Atlanta. And my cousin, who is still living today south of Atlanta, he's working for Delta. So I went down and stayed with Richard. And I said, Richard, if you could help me get an interview, I'd love to work for Delta because I worked for the Air Force. That led nowhere. I got an interview, went nowhere. And then I remember interviewing with Bell South.
Okay.
AT&T. I can still remember this gentleman who seemed like an old man. He's probably 40 years old. And he interviewed me, and he sat me down, and he said, Bill, we would love to have you work for us. But let me suggest to you, you don't do this. You should go to college. I mean, he said, I will hire you, but I don't want to hire you. You got the GI Bill. You can go to college. You're going to have a much better job. And then you come back and see me when you get your college degree done, right? And that was also another person who kind of reframed my thinking. And, I was going to get probably a minimum wage job working on a telephone pole or something. I don't know. But so God didn't open up a place for me then.
Yeah.
Which led me to, okay, I'll start community college.
It's interesting that I said that to you, and it was enough to move you in that direction. I mean, you could have said, the old guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? But you didn't. You thought about it and said, it's probably right.
That, and he wasn't going to pay me very much. So
All right, I like that. Economics rule. What am I going to do?
So, I started community college. Then I transferred to a place I was familiar with up in Boone, North Carolina, Appalachian State.
Yeah.
I went there because I had an aunt there I could live with.
Okay.
And I finished there.
That's
Then
funny.
I went
That's
on
why
and got
I went to the University of Miami from New Jersey because my sister lived in Miami, and I could live with her and I could commute to school.
exactly.
Yeah, and that's
It's
when the
funny how
University of
that
Miami
happened.
was like a public school back then. That was the only
Right.
4-year college in South Florida at the time.
Right.
It's different now, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you were living with your aunt, going to Appalachian State.
Well, I have to be honest. I was mostly living in my van then, Charlie. But I was going to college. I was working, and I always worked. Through college. I think it taught me kind of self-sufficiency and entrepreneurship, and I figured things out.
When did you realize versus when you came out of high school? When did you realize, I could do this? I can compete academically. When did you come to that?
I'd say the first year of community college.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I thought, wow, it's just a matter of figuring out the system and figuring out what they need. I'll give it back to them. I mean, that's what college was back then.
Sounds like you learned a lot from the Air Force.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I learned in college, except I learned how to manage my time. I remember one time I had a job. This is when I was in Charlotte, and I had a job cleaning carpets.
Okay.
Service master, a company still around, and you had a whole system and all your little secret formulas. And I'm cleaning carpets, and I thought, well, golly, I could sell this. I don't have to actually do the work. I want to be a salesman, right? So I sign up, and I'm going to go sell carpet cleaning. And I had my little kit, and I had a little spot remover. Show me your spot, and I make it disappear, right? And what happened on that is I was out in the suburbs, this really pretty house and pretty yard, and I was going up to the door, and this German Shepherd came out to meet me. And he tracked me down out in the middle of the yard, and I couldn't go to the house, couldn't go to my car. And I'm standing out there thinking, I don't really want to be a salesman anymore. This is not working for me. And this dog's going to eat my leg. Finally, the people came home and got him. But, you have to try those things out. I didn't, I really tried to avoid.
I can't believe it. You were dissuaded from a sales career because of a German Shepherd. My God, you got put off pretty quickly, didn't you?
Well, I also did not, you're only going to get 1 out of 20. And I just didn't like the failure rate. It's like, God.
Okay.
Oh, man, I've had so many jobs.
So where do you go from there? So you do graduate from Appalachian State.
I did.
What was your degree in?
Well, I got a business degree. And I was really thinking I might go back and work with my dad, running the broom factory. And then there was another year to get an additional degree called Bachelor of Technology, which was to teach at the community college level.
Okay.
Right? So I was going to teach business. And North Carolina was the leading state in the country back then in community colleges. So we were on a roll. So it's a really good path to take. The only problem, Charlie, is while I was kind of a smartass and would ask questions, I was very shy. And it came up for me to get my teaching degree that I would have to go teach for a semester. I couldn't even get up before the class of people I knew. I mean, I just freeze up. Now, I've led teams.
Wait a second. You were teaching. I thought you said you were teaching in the Air Force.
I was, but I taught what I knew. There I was supposed to teach business principles, which means I had to memorize all that.
Okay.
Right?
Back to your strength, right?
Right. Yeah. So I went to, I won't say which college, but I made an appointment with the president of a college and went in and said, I know I've got to get this teaching degree, but I'm really interested in administration, not teaching. And what I'd like to propose that I will be I will let you be my mentor, and I will be with you every day, evening. I'll carry a briefcase. I'll show up meetings. I'll take notes. If you'll sign off that I talked. And he agreed.
Wow.
So they thought I'd talked. I did. I hung with the president, and I learned a lesson there. I could finagle a deal. You just had to figure out what the deal was. And that was a good lesson, because it was just as challenging to be in that job than teaching a community college class.
But you must have learned a lot following this president around.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. And then I lived in the mountains, kind of a mountain man out in the country, chopping my own wood, doing all that for a couple of years. And then just thought, this is not a future, So, and this is where things really shift, Charlie.
Oh, okay.
And the shift was, I started really asking the question, what does God want me to do? Okay. And while I've always had a personal relationship, right? I grew up in the Baptist church. I had a personal relationship and always had that. Right. But I had never felt God demanded, what was going to tell me what I need to do.
Yeah. So
I found a school, very odd place. It was over at West Georgia College. Wasn't even part of the university then. And they had a school there, and they kind of kept it on the outskirts of the campus because we were a little weird. But it was psychology and spirituality. It's what we call transpersonal psychology, right? So you're learning psychology and counseling and therapy, but it had a spiritual, thing that ran through it.
Okay.
It's very unique. I mean, people came from all over the world there. And that was the thing that crystallized my call.
How did you find that? How did you even find that place?
I went to, I remember going down to, is it Lakeland, Florida? I went to a weekend seminar down there. It was hippie kids. We're all down there in our vans, But I had this, I just had this deep experience that, God was saying, you need to step up. You need to do something. And you could go to San Francisco to this expensive school, or you could go to Boulder. There was this Buddhist school, Naropa. I wasn't Buddhist. I didn't know. And then I found out God for, almost nothing. You can go to this little school in Georgia. It was hidden kind of at that time. But it changed my life.
So take me along on this path of how's God answering this question. So you're chopping wood in the woods, and you're saying, there's not a lot of purpose here, so where, and if I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, it's sort of like he didn't create me to just kind of hang out here, right? So what is it that he has for me, right? That question, as soon as you ask that question, you're in trouble, because you can't unring the bell at that point, right?
You can't unask the question.
You can't
right. And it leads to the next question.
There you go, right.
It's not just one question that you ask, it leads to the next one.
So how did that unfold?
Every statement has a story.
That's really interesting.
Well, I'm dating a young lady and living together up in the mountains, and we're all mountain people. And we got, I'll relate it to your question, Charlie. We got to the point in our life where it was clear that we loved each other, we shared, our families knew each other, but we were mature enough to know that we were really going to go different directions.
Huh.
Right?
Okay.
And so we decided to be adults and break up, which takes about 5 tries in the whole year, right, to do that. But the final one was, this is not going to work out. I just got to leave the state, right? I just need to leave. And it's 1973. So I had a job waiting on me building condos down in Fort Lauderdale. I'm in my little Volkswagen van, and I'm heading to Florida, thinking I'm free. And gas shortage came along. Hell, it took a week to get there. Arrived and the job had been stopped, right? So I had no money, no job, a van, and I hadn't
and
told
no
my
gas.
parents.
You had no gas.
This car was so old, you had to have a marker on the window that stood the mileage because it didn't have a gas gauge. You didn't know when you were going to run out. But I got down there, and this was God working in my life. I met this guy, and he said, "You can park in the apartment. You come in and shower, but you can't live with me, right?" And I had not told my parents, because this represents a failure and leaving. So I went down and worked in a labor pool. Now here I'm a 4-year veteran. I've got a 4-year college degree, and I'm working down here with winos and homeless people, and it was, and everybody I was working for wasn't very smart. You hate to work for that guy. And that's when I thought, man, I'm at the bottom. It's got to be a way. And I'll relate that story to a couple of years later because that really was God working in my life. But I got enough money to come back home. I went to that conference, found out about the school, and I, again, without a lot of money, went down. I was living in my van. I was showering in the gym. Security would catch me and throw me off the campus. But I was very clear by then of I want to go deep. I really want to ask this deeper question.
What was the deeper question? I want to go deep.
What am I going to do? What am I going to do in my life?
Okay.
And I met my wife to be.
And that question, by the way, that question gives you purpose right out of the gate, right? I mean, if you don't have the question, you don't even know you're not even on a path to pursue anything, right? At least you're on a path to pursue the answer to the question, which keeps you going.
Yeah, if you don't stop and take time out, if you don't pray or meditate or walk in the woods or something, the chatter will go on where you never can hear. It's just chatter. It's what we call monkey mind, in meditation. So that was, you have these points in your life. That was a point where I thought, wow, I was 21, 22. It was not clear. And I thought, I got to get more serious about this. And I was lucky in that it was a deep spiritual question and not just a logistical question. You know what I mean? I was just coming to that deeper part.
What would be, when you say it wasn't a logistical question, and I'm not sure that I understand what you mean when you say that. What's the other way to ask the question that makes it just purely logistical?
Well, I'd already tried working on logistical. I ended up, working in a labor pool in Florida. That was my logistical plan.
I see. Okay.
The deeper question is, I wanted, this may sound weird, Charlie. I wanted a deeper experience with God.
Okay.
I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know what it would feel like. I didn't know. And I also, by that time in my life,
that you realized you were living apart from God in a sense. Okay. There was a piece of that.
Never lost, I never lost that I wasn't a person of faith, but it wasn't anything I was focused on at that
yeah, right. Okay.
stage, right? And also, I had a deep interest, even as a child, 12, 13 years old. I always wanted to know why there were so many different religions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When I'm 12 years old, I'm the kid in church who raises their hand and say, well, if you're living in China and never even heard of Jesus, you're still going to hell, And it's like, sit down, kid. We're not going to answer that question. So what I was interested in is not religion, but spirituality.
Okay.
I was interested in the experience. I just wanted to go deep, learn practices, that would get you out of your ego and into your practice. So I studied Judaism and Muslim and Hindu. I studied all those. And I met my wife now of 45, 46 years. I met her in graduate school. And when I finished, I married well. Well, I married somebody who didn't want a motorboat or a second home and we said,
how come I never hear women ever say that they married well? I always hear men say they married well. What is this? I mean, there has to be one woman who said that she married well.
Well,
okay?
maybe one, but men are the one. But
so you married well, yeah. So how did it go?
Well, we had. I think we shared our seeking, and we shared that we wanted to live our values. We didn't want to be hypocrites, right? We didn't want to say, "Oh, I'm a Christian, but all I do is go to church on Sunday," right? So we actually, with several friends from school, came to Atlanta without knowing a soul. I bought a house across from Piedmont Park, 5-bedroom, big house on Myrtle Street for $30,000. Owner finance.
Is this 74?
1975.
Okay.
And this is an old country guy that had bought up property in downtown Atlanta. The man hugged my neck. I don't think he'd ever hugged a man in his life. He hugged my neck for taking it off his hands. But we started and then bought the house next door about 4 years later. So we had 2 big houses, and we started a community. And we were all older. I mean, we all had graduate degrees. We'd already done our rock and roll and sex and all that stuff. We were really there to serve, but no capital, didn't know anybody. We started a book business. We started a bakery. We started a restaurant. I started working at the church and became the director of ministry there. So the whole community was oriented towards service. And I found out I was an entrepreneur, right? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But, you take an idea, you got an asset. Why did we start a bakery? Because one of the guys, Dave, made great bread. We called it Dave's Bread. We rented the bagel bakery on Cheshire Bridge, went over there at 8 o'clock at night. All the labor was free because we were all in the community. And we'd work till about 2 o'clock in the morning, put all that bread in a van, bring it home, cool it down, chop it on the kitchen table the next morning, deliver it to a health food store. Completely illegal, Charlie. You can't do that.
Oh, you can't? But I didn't know that.
Well, now you got to have a license to do that. But it was great bread. It was really good bread.
And there were health food stores that would pay you for it. That's great.
But you also, I became the leader and the spiritual leader of this community. And we had Christians, Jews, and Muslims living together.
Mm-hmm.
We prayed together. We meditated. We worshiped. We had an altar representing the different traditions. And I tell you what that did for me. It helped me to go deeper into my own tradition, right? What I was interested in was mysticism. I was interested in experience and not just learning the history of Islam or the history of Hinduism. I learned that. But what we found out is that we had something deeper in common.
Okay. And
that if you are really following your faith, if you're really a servant of that faith, it's pretty much calling us to the same task, my experience.
Okay.
And instead of me, my mother got worried, what are you living with all these weird people? And we had homeless and mentally ill people living with us. And but one, it taught me leadership. I had to manage this motley crew and work and start these businesses. And I had to go really deep to find the strength to sustain. It was just a lot of work. And again, it was a lot of responsibility. And we did that for 10 years.
Where did you find that strength?
Well, I think you find it in your heart. You find it, you find it in that communion.
That's where you found it.
Yeah.
It's through that togetherness. That's where the power, the strength was for you.
We shared a value towards service, and we spent a lot of time respecting each other's choices.
Okay.
And learning about each other's traditions. But my mother was worried I was going to run off and, become a Hindu and wear orange robes or something. And I say, no, Mom, this is taking me deeper into my own tradition.
Meaning that it was bringing you closer to your relationship with Jesus, or it was?
Yeah.
That's how you felt it was.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Through this diversity of faith, it brought you closer to Christ in your faith.
It did.
That's interesting. That's interesting that
and
would happen.
It was absolute blessing too.
Yeah.
And very much like going in the Air Force. All of a sudden, I'm with black folks, New York folks, people from California, and it's like, what do you find? Get all that stuff out of the way. We're pretty much the same, aren't we?
Uh-huh. Well, we all created by God, right? In His image. Yeah, that's what it is.
There you go.
So how did that progress then? Where did that take you?
Well, it took me to St. Luke's Episcopal Church.
That's where you were a minister?
Yeah, but I wasn't an Episcopalian at that point. I joined the Episcopal Church. But at that point, I wanted to serve, and they had actually started a community kitchen probably 3 months before I got there.
Okay.
And it was the little ladies of the church. This is 1975, 76. Atlanta, all the white folks had moved out. I mean, it was rough.
Oh, really? That's when all that happened?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was
Charles Stanley's biggest church. That big church was First Baptist of Atlanta, downtown Atlanta.
I worked with them. Yeah, they were there then.
Okay.
But they moved when, in the late 80s?
Yeah, they did. Eventually moved outside the perimeter, yeah.
Very disappointing because
in the mid 70s, you're saying the white people in Atlanta started to move out of Atlanta.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Atlanta was second poorest city in the country, second to Newark.
To Newark?
Yeah.
I'd never heard that either. Okay.
Yeah. All the capital went out. That's why, you have 6 lanes on Spring Street so you could run 60 miles an hour to get out of town as fast as you can at 5 o'clock, right? That was for a purpose, Charlie. We're leaving before it gets dark down here. So those very different times.
So the church was St. Luke's would have been serving generally a white population probably. And then I'm talking about late 60s into the early 70s, and now you're mid 70s. It must have changed.
Well, only two. A lot of churches moved out too, but you had the Catholic Church, then you had St. Luke's, then you had North Avenue Presbyterian, then you had Grace Lutheran.
Okay.
Then you had St. Mark's Methodist. They were on Peachtree.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd heard about this soup kitchen. I was going to go down to help, and I started on 10th Street, walking south, and I ended up at St. Mark's Methodist. And I went in there and told them I'd come to volunteer, and they said, "For what?" I said, "Well, I'm here to feed folks." "No, we don't feed any folks here." And I said, "Well, I'm sure you do. I heard it was a Saint something, No. And then I went to the Lutheran church, and I went down the street till I found it. but it was quite a
But
different.
you went to all these churches asking that question, and you finally found St. Luke's?
Fifth church on the block, Yeah.
What made you want to feed folks?
I just wanted to help people. There were a lot of hungry people at the park. There was the house that we bought had actually been an abandoned house that a lot of people, homeless people, had lived in.
Yeah.
So a lot of the homeless that I came to serve knew my house really well because they had crashed there.
Okay.
That's one of those things where you're guided, but you don't know that you're guided. And you're guided to do something, but you don't know what to.
Yeah.
So we were already making soup in the community and feeding people across the street in the park just because people needed to be fed. But we didn't have any institutional support. So when I went to St. Luke's, I volunteered. And within a month, I was the director because they were still cutting their sandwiches in triangles and giving them little bowls of soup. It hadn't really evolved yet. So that, and then I was also a part of helping start the Training and Counseling Center and a CPE training center for seminary students. It's one of the first places in the country you could do your CPA on the streets instead of a hospital or a prison.
Okay.
That was a big deal back then. So I was a part of that.
And this was all on the St. Luke's platform, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
did you meet the person who started the St. Luke's soup kitchen?
Oh yeah, Jenny Pearson.
Oh, okay.
Blue-haired lady from Buckhead. She was a force of nature. And another example is that the minister there, Tom Bowers, who any Episcopalian would know his name. He was just a transformational figure. When he came to me as a volunteer one day, came in the soup kitchen, he said, "Hey, yeah, we want you to be the director here." And I thought, "Are you going to pay me?" "No, we're not going to pay you. We just want you to be the director." I think I got paid $50 a week. But another person that might be known in this community, certainly be known in the business world, was a gentleman named Brad Curry.
Okay. And,
Brad Curry, 92 years old now, still living. But, he was the number 2 guy at Trust Company Bank. And then he went on to get in the cardboard business. But Brad was the senior warden. And I remember, for me, he called me the hippie kid from the commune down the street. But what I had was a bunch of healthy people, volunteers. So he thought, well, if you can bring all these volunteers in, they're all healthy and work the whole shift. We want you. That was another person who saw things in me that I had not seen in myself yet. And he became a mentor for my whole life.
How about that?
Yeah. And Brad will tell you the story. The nave was falling in. The church was 100 years old. Members were leaving. And they didn't have any money. And, I think when I first started, I think it might have been $8,000 a year or something like that. And they just kind of took it on faith. Said, we'll raise this money and pay you.
Wow. And so you do that for, so now you're the director of, what was it called? Director of what?
St. Luke's Community Kitchen. It's Crossroads Ministry today.
Okay. And you did that for, I think you told me that you were there for doing that for 4 years. And that was both the counseling center as well as feeding those.
I wasn't the director of the counseling center, but I was a part of getting that started and did help train CPE training.
Okay.
But, I did that for 4 years. And then for 2 years, I continued in that position, but started the food bank. And I started that in the basement of the church.
What did you start?
The food bank, I started that in the basement of the church. We didn't have a loading dock. Yeah.
So
3 years.
Where did that whole idea of, you were doing the work within St. Luke's. Where did this whole bigger idea of a food bank, which no one had ever heard of before? Tell tell me how that all sort of came about for you. How did you connect those dots that all of a sudden here we are?
You know how God will put desperation in your heart sometimes. We were having so many people come in, we had to start feeding in shifts. So we feed 75 in the parish hall, send them out, bring another 75 in. And I just thought the ministry is sitting down with people, being with them, treating them with dignity, and listening to their story. And it got to be this revolving line where we didn't have time to talk. I'd feed you all you wanted, fill your pockets up with food, and out you go. And for me, I thought, this is too big for a church. And the real transformational work was not happening in the same way. So it literally was not, you get
but this
credit.
Concept of transformation, when did that hit you? Like you're serving you're making soup and bread for those people that were hungry in the park across from the house, and then you're doing the St. Luke's thing and you're feeding the hungry there. I mean, when did this idea of this, I'm really transforming lives, when did that happen?
I would say, Charlie, that was a part of the community's understanding of transformation, of energy from God out to people, right? A real thing that happens. And you're a vessel. You're just a vessel.
Okay.
Right? So you've got to empty out for it to come through. And
was that from you, or was that from the pastor at that church, or was it from your mentor that sort of helped sort of drive this sort of idea, or was it from you?
Well, nothing's from me, but I come
through
up with
you,
ideas.
like God, it came from God through you is what I meant. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but sometimes people have an influence for us, and we go, like, whoa, I didn't think of it that way, and now I see it clearly, and I didn't see it at all before. It seems like you saw it early.
So I'd say that happened when I really started studying mysticism.
Okay.
Union with God, right? Not just.
Is that what mysticism means?
For me, it was to be in the presence, it's a real experience. Okay. And that's what I was looking for. And then you have that, and then you think, well, it's okay to have it. You might have had a transformational experience. What good does that do if you don't share it? Right? And what you've got to do is be able to be with people different than you. They might be at a different station of life. They're an addict or mentally ill. They'd closed the mental hospitals back then. All these people hit the streets. Or it might be somebody from a different tradition whose tradition and habits are very different. So you've got to learn to speak all those different languages. You've got to learn to be with people.
What you're speaking to now is this environment you're in now that we're talking about is the antithesis of what you grew up in Denton, North Carolina. The antithesis of it. Yeah, that's incredible.
In a way, yeah. Yeah, everybody that came to our door when I was growing up was welcome. So
it all kind of looked the same, kind of,
Well, they did back then, yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
And then you learn so much from people different than yourself, right? And then when food became, I can do so much with food because it's not. I came to understand that you're coming to nourish the body, but you've also got to nourish the heart and the soul. Okay, you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to beat people over the head. It's a matter of being with, and people will feel it. For me, I'm not evangelical. I'm not trying to save anybody. Some people are. I'm not.
Okay.
I just do it by how I'm present with people. So for instance, with the food bank, I have to learn business. I have to talk business. I have to talk ROI. I have to talk about how I can do inventory. And, if I'm working in the faith community, I've got to talk. And if I'm in a church, I can talk. I can quote scripture. If I go over to the synagogue, I might not be able to quote scripture, but I do have an affinity, right? So you've got to be able to speak to these different groups, and they will intuit whether you're sincere or not.
Right.
So that's the idea of speaking
you had the
any
track
different
record
languages.
that gave you the credibility, meaning you've done the things, you've walked the walk. I mean, this is, but how did this concept, I want to go back to this concept that you said, it became clear to me that, we had this line of people outside the church to be fed. We'd do 75. Okay, you guys finished? Get out. And we have the next 75, right? And you said, this is too big. This is too big a need for one church. So how did that translate into this? How did the concept of food bank evolve from that? Because that's the problem you saw, you see?
Well, I was sourcing the food for the soup kitchen.
Oh, okay.
You know what that meant? I went in the dumpster behind the Kroger over at Ansley Mall. I wasn't above that. There was a lot of food being thrown out. You could go to the store manager and say, give me the food you're throwing away.
Yeah, save me a trip to the dumpster. I'll pick it up before they throw it in there, right?
Well, first they would say they didn't have it.
Oh, okay.
I used to have a Polaroid camera and take a picture, pop it out, walk up in front of the store and say, well, what's this, right? Then you find out he didn't have the authority to give it to you. Okay, well, who do I talk to about authority, right? So you have to kind of go up the chain, but you realize that you couldn't even calculate how much food was being wasted. Not only at the farmers, at the manufacturing, at the wholesale, at the retail, at the restaurants. I created the first prepared food program in 1986, 87 to pick up from restaurants. Because, my God, it's great food. They throw it out at the end of the night. I mean, break your heart. And I thought, why can't we get that? Actually, I'd been doing it for a few years, but it was illegal. So, we had to make it legal and get by the liability laws. But I guess I'm realizing I was good at well, you've heard me say this, Charlie, when people ask me how I'm doing. I often answer, I'm overwhelmed with opportunity. That's my stock answer.
I've never heard you say that. I've never heard you say that. Okay.
No, I say it all the time because if you see problems and challenges and people that are out of harmony, right? If you see that as a problem, it's a problem. But if you see it as an opportunity, right? And you know this by being an investor, when people come up with an idea, they got to see it as an opportunity. And what do we do with that opportunity? So I remember going over to Steve Alterman, the Alterman family owned Big Star. They kicked me out the first 2 or 3 times because they were all Jewish. And I was over there quoting Jesus, about feeding the hungry. It didn't go over that big with them. But when I finally went over to Steve and I said, Steve, what would make this a good business decision for you? And he said, well, if you can figure out, because they called it shrinkage, if you can figure out why I'm not selling that product, that would be. I said, okay, I'll do that. I didn't know how to do that. I thought my staff would kill me for that because we couldn't scan it. You had to inventory. But it might be that the person in the store was cutting the boxes, or they weren't rotating the inventory, or they weren't ordering correctly. And a store manager could cover up all that by throwing it in the dumpster.
I got it.
To cover their tracks. So I'm giving Steve some information to make more money. And I said, if you make more money, I'll get more food. And right. I remember after a couple of years, we sat down for coffee one day and he says, Bill, I just figured this out. He said, if we're successful here, I'm going to have less waste. And I said, well, isn't that what you wanted? He says, yeah, but what about you? And then you knew you had him because he was thinking about me.
Yeah.
He wasn't thinking about him. He was thinking about this is not going to work out for you. So I said, well, we're going to figure out another way you're going to help me. That's all. If it ain't food, it'll be something else. You can help me on inventory. Give me a truck, any number of things. So that helped me understand that when you're trying to build a business, you go to the best in class people. Like when I want to learn logistics, who do I go to? I go to UPS. I got Coca-Cola. They got 800 trucks a day out on the road, right? Went to Cisco Foods. So you go to them, and they're always honored to be asked. And you say, come over here and work for 6 months. I'd get a whole team of people, and they'd help me figure it out. So you always go to the best in class. I'll tell you a great story. I was trying to teach my staff. We probably had 40, 50 people then. And I'd had the opportunity to go up to Harvard and study. And I'd met the guy that wrote the seminal marketing book. He taught the class. And I came back and it was on customer service. And I'm on fire, man. I came back and we're all going to learn customer service. So I got a book, gave it to the whole staff. And I said, everybody read it. And they came back and said, Bill, we don't think about our agencies, which were churches. We don't think about them as customers. They're our partners. So I looked around for a partner service book, and they didn't have any. And I said, well, mark through in the book, every time you see customer, put partner there, same principles apply. And, we're going along, and I thought, okay, who in town does the best customer service? There's a Malcolm Baldrige Award in the business world. It's the highest award for customer service. Now, who in town has won that award? Ritz-Carlton. I marched myself down to Ritz-Carlton, didn't know him, and said, I've come here to be trained. I want to bring my whole food bank down here to be trained, Ritz-Carlton. They said, you're crazy. We don't do that.
Who did you talk to? You remember?
The guy who was running the hotel.
Had he heard of you?
He agreed. I don't know. We didn't know each other when I went in. He knew by the time I left, and he agreed. I mean, we're written up in the history of the Ritz-Carlton. There's a big book on that. We're written up in that. So I took my whole staff down there, and we did 3 days of training. Ritz-Carlton people is, ladies and gentlemen, to serve ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
So the whole deal is, on the 5th floor, you have a problem, you ask somebody. They don't call downstairs. They fix your problem. They don't leave until they fix it. I said, that's what I want. So we all got these little cards with our values. We picked our own, and we started using it at staff meetings. Okay, what's number 7? And you had to tell me what number 7. So I was always touring people around the food bank, and I told the forklift guys and drivers, who usually didn't want to talk to the public, I said, now, when I'm walking through with some big deal, probably trying to hit them up for money, I want you to come over, introduce yourself, tell me what your job is, and why it relates to the mission of the organization, why you're important.
That was part of the Ritz training, too. They all knew that. Okay.
They all knew that, okay? And people avoided me for several months. Oh, my God, Bill's going to call him.
Oh, here
then
comes
it got
Bill.
to be, then it got to be so much fun that 3 forklifts would pull up and try to be in competition. Because they really got it down. And then we changed the staff meeting to the first 30 minutes of the staff meeting is to brag on somebody else, not yourself. You had to tell a story on somebody else that offered great customer service. And it wasn't a setup. Somebody would say, well, I want to tell you about Melvin over here. The car wouldn't start. He took time off, got the jumper cables out there, fixed them off, sent them on their way. So that's culture, based on values.
Yeah.
And you can teach that in a company. So got 1,000 stories like that, but you always learn from the best.
This for those that don't understand the food bank in that. I mean, we understand a church feeding people. Then take me to the food bank and tell me what's the model for the food bank, if you will, on how it serves the hungry. Because there was too many hungry people the problem. There was too many hungry people coming to one location. And I had to source all this food for this location. And we weren't in the transformation business anymore. We were just feeding people because I had to get them in and out. So then this food bank just says, this isn't working. It's broken. And the way to fix it is this food bank concept. Tell me the concept so other people can understand it.
Simply put, You centralize the acquisition and decentralize the distribution.
Okay.
Okay. So simply put, you've got a central place, and I can go talk business. You need to talk liability, we can talk liability. You need to talk tax law, we can tax law. We need to talk about logistics and getting there on time or counting. You can negotiate all that, and you're working up the ladder. You're not talking to the Kroger guy. You're going to Cincinnati to have that conversation.
I got
right?
it. Okay.
That's where the decisions. The key to the ministry, and I'd call the food bank for me a ministry, was the decentralization. That means you're getting food close to where people are, right?
So I centralize food acquisition, meaning I take the responsibility as the food bank to get all these sources of food to the food bank. Now I have a distribution issue. And now go ahead and say what you were going to say. Go ahead.
So we ended up with like 650 congregations and nonprofit, Salvation Army or whoever, who use food, as part of their ministry. And they could access that from me.
So you relieve them of that burden of finding food, and now they can focus on the transformation piece.
Well, I don't tell them how to run their ministry, but I would certainly suggest this is how we might use this tool, right?
I see. Okay.
But we're not micromanaging people's ministry. You're not going to be successful in that. But Charlie, when you look back, you must
have gone through some point. Some of your history must have been maybe in building out these partnerships is to recommend sort of a best practices in transformation.
Oh, sure.
You must have gone through that where you've got pushback and everything, and you finally go, look, I'm not in that business. You did do that, right?
It was a contract. I mean, and we monitor you.
Oh, you
don't
did.
tell you how to run your ministry, but this is how you got to handle the food. This is how you got to account for it. This got to handle your money. If you're working with me, this is no joke. It's a real contract. And a lot of churches, it's too hard. And I said, well, go somewhere else and get your food. But this is how we sustain something, by being accountable for it. We had a saying, things that get counted get done, right? So counting is very important.
You said that pretty quickly for me. What was the saying?
Things that get counted get done.
Oh, okay.
Right? And that was a real motto for us. And we counted everything. It drive people crazy. But all that data, this was before people talked about data. But for us, the industry had to know the food wasn't going to get back in competition with themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had to guarantee it wasn't going to get down the corner grocery, in competition with the Kroger. And two, had to be sure that they weren't going to get sued. Right? So it would go all the way back to say.
It's number two.
It's my Southern accent, Charlie. It's not to be sued, not to be liable if somebody gets sick.
I got it.
That's particularly true for General Foods or Kraft or one of those big companies.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And if they give it to the store gives it to us, we give it to the church. You give it to the family, and their power gets cut off, and they keep trying to stretch that food and get sick. If an attorney gets a hold of them, they're going to sue until they find money.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I cut that off. You can sue me at the food bank. The rest of those folks are legally not responsible by the contract.
Pretty cool. Okay.
That's great. If you want to sue the food bank, good luck,
So when you do something like this, wow, it just took a while to roll all this out, but still somebody had to get paid here now. So St. Luke's isn't paying you your salary if you're building a food bank. I mean, then you got 40, 50 employees and all that. Like, where does all that money come from?
Well, and it's always the question. No shortage of ideas.
A lot of people running in with buying anything here. Like you said, I'm getting food for free. I'm storing the food. I'm now having to figure out who my partners are and what their needs are. I'm distributing the food. I've got trucks coming in, trucks going out. I got all this going on. Who's paying for all this?
Okay, good question. Because one thing is, if you don't have any skin in the game, you don't value things, right? So the congregation or the nonprofit group would have to pay about 7 cents a pound, no matter what it was. It could be meat, 7 cents. And the produce and the bread and all that stuff was free. So, your canned goods and so forth. So the 7 cents covered, I don't know, 15, 20% of my budget. I had to go raise.
So when they came in and they shopped, I put shopped in parentheses, for what their needs were, you would just put it on a gigantic scale. And if it was 1,000 pounds, they're going to pay you $70.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Whatever it was. It could be bread, whatever they took. Weigh it all. I got it.
Yeah. Now here's an interesting thing, Charlie. And it both makes sense and doesn't make sense. It makes sense around liability and tax and money. It doesn't make sense around transformation. Okay, so I'll tell you what it is. The federal government says that if you write it off, a company's going to write it off, right, for a certain amount, and they get credit. You can't sell, barter, or trade that food.
Even down the line?
Yeah. Huh. Now, we got a dispensation from IRS, took several years, that food banks were charging a handling fee. We're not charging for the product. And if you can't pay, I'm still going to give it to you, right? But we would charge that 7 cents. But when it got to the church, the same principle applies. If you get it for free, do you really value it, right? But the church can't say, if you'll go out here and mow the yard, I'll give you the food. Or if you come on Sunday to service, we'll give you 2 bags of food, right? Or whatever it is. You can't force that. So you have to be creative, Charlie. Meaning you still got to work by those principles of value and transformation without breaking the law.
And sometimes you actually change the law too, I would imagine.
Sometimes we didn't change that law, but I'll give it.
Because it had to do with the IRS, and no one changes anything with the IRS except Congress.
I'll tell you what, St. Anthony's Church over there on the over on the west side, West End. St. Anthony's Catholic Church. The little nuns ran a soup kitchen down there. And I used to go over and eat all the time, and the whole community around there would come down to the basement of the church. Go down there, and they would charge, as $1 or something, but they charge for the foods like a cafeteria. Well, they're getting all the food from me, right? But they're charging. And I went in and I said, we can't do this. Well, we got to do it. We got to stay alive. I said, well, let's be creative about it. Why don't you ask for a donation? And if they can't pay, just go ahead and feed them. And if I've got to make up the difference, I will. But you've got to put donation down here and not force it. And somebody will come in here and check you out on this. So it got to be this little game, we play. But, people, if it's a donation, they'll give you $3 instead of $1. I mean,
that's what happens.
God,
right? Exactly. Yeah.
God doubling the money. But here's another example. We started over in Grant Park, Bob Lupton and that ministry. This was with Chad Hale, and ran a church over in Grant Park, Georgia Avenue Church, non-denominational. And a nice little church. And went over to Chad. And I said, Chad, got an idea that we could start a co-op, right? And a co-op's different. You got to pay and you got to give time, right? And that's really using food as a community building tool. You're teaching responsibility. You're teaching leadership. And so we started that up. And the way it worked is they got about 90% of the food from the food bank for essentially free. And whatever people had to pay, $6 or $8, they'd go out and buy some chicken or something. And I said, Chad, you got to keep 2 books. One's for the food bank and one's for this. And you can't mix those up because one day we'll get audited. I can't believe I'm saying this and you're going to put it out in public. But we've been doing that for 20 years, and that's really co-ops are transformational.
Yeah.
right? Because you get some people who are in co-op and you pick a leader out and say, well, they're a natural leader. Why don't you help start another one? So they got co-ops all over the place.
That's
In
fabulous.
fact, I have them in my, I bought the old food bank last year because it moved. And I brought them into that new facility. I've just remodeled the old food bank
Oh, I didn't know that.
into a community center.
When you were building the food bank, what was the biggest? When did it seems like in every startup business that I've been involved with, there always comes that, if we don't solve this, we're dead. It could be, we can't seem to find a repeatable process to sell our technology, whatever it might be. And, we just can't go on this way, and then there's always this sort of like the thick and thin group that kind of comes together and says, everybody, some of them, 80% of the people run for the hills, that 20% stick around and they bust through that wall. And then the life starts. What was that? Did you have that happen at the food bank in its history where it was threatened like that, to where this isn't, we have a great idea, but it's not going well here,
Yeah, about 6 or 8, 10 times a year. Yeah.
Okay.
If you hadn't failed at something, you hadn't tried very hard. Everything's not a success.
But there was ever a failure that was a threat? Maybe even in your mind that said, I don't know how to get out of this one. I know the problem, but I don't have a solution for it. I don't know what to do. It's sort of the bring you to your knees kind of moment, to use sort of Christian talk, if you will,
Yeah, you're looking for those stories. Yeah,
and then there's the secular one is, I got pinned to the wall, This is the hitting bottom as a company, if you will, right?
Okay, I got a bunch of these stories, but I'll tell you one. Before we started the program I just told you about, and this is late 80s.
Okay.
I heard about this co-op.
So this is 10 years into the food bank. Food bank started in 79. Okay, go ahead.
Well, we became legal in 79, so that was a start. I heard about this co-op program in San Diego, California. I've never been there, but and it was by St. Vincent de Paul, which is a Catholic charity. They started a co-op, and I was enamored with it. And then they had duplicated it in Milwaukee, right? So I'm studying that, and I call them up, everything. And I thought, this is it. We're going to transform the food bank, which is a collection, distribution, and then another partner doing the work, into a citywide co-op. Because I wanted to figure out a way for people to contribute. It's around their own dignity. You're just not giving somebody something; they're contributing to it. But the law, and
that's part of the transformation.
That's part of the transformation. Right. And I thought I could do it citywide. And I hired, I think I had 8 or 9 people. I rented a warehouse, 25,000 square feet. And I had to go purchase that food, right? And then resell it. And we put that program together. Mark Baker, an Episcopal priest who I'd met out of Boston, he was the director. And we're going out to churches trying to sell the idea. And I don't know what at that point in our life, we might have had $300,000 or $400,000 in reserve.
What was the idea that you were trying to sell?
A co-op.
Okay, so how does this? You come to me, I'm a church. You come to me, what do you tell me?
Yeah. I'm saying I'd like for you guys to, it's kind of like a CSA, where you buy food from a farmer. We would provide you food at this price.
We don't know what CSAs are. We're not in your
Well,
business.
CSA is like you can contract with a farmer for a box of food every week.
Oh, okay.
$20, right?
Yeah.
I've started a whole new ministry, Food Well Alliance. That's a whole other story, but that's something else.
I said you were still inventing. That was part of my introduction. Go ahead.
Well, I've started 2 new nonprofits since I retired, but
so you go to the church. What do you tell them?
That here's the model. And it would be for your congregation, it would be a cheaper way for them to get the food. And it would be great for the ministry of the church because everybody's going to volunteer and help, right? So it was a community building.
So we're going to help you start a Feed the Hungry program in your church.
Well, we'd already done that around giving you food from the food bank. This is a different deal where you paid for it and volunteered.
Okay.
It's a participatory. And it's different than the food bank because you're getting around that law of you can't sell, barter, trade. This is a different model. And I ran that maybe for a year and a half. And we may have had $300,000 or $400,000 in reserves at that point, which was not a lot of reserves for the size program we had. I spent every cent of that. We went broke at the food bank.
Whoa.
And we were that close to making it, right? And I had to go to my board and say, that idea didn't work and I spent all the money. That's humbling.
Yeah.
That's humbling. And I shut it down. 2 of the people sued me for firing them. It's like, what the hell? I'm out of money. What? How are you going to sue me?
Sue somebody with money, right? That's one of the first rules of suing. Like you said, they people are going to sue all the way up until they find somebody with money. But yeah, if you're going to sue me, good luck.
Yeah, they sued at the bottom.
Where did you wind up with a board? How did all that come about?
You start out with friends and go there.
But you thought you needed a board?
No, you got to have a board. I mean, you've got to.
I mean, you say it like it's like everybody knows that. I know a lot of people have businesses; they don't have boards. They're the president.
I know, but in the nonprofit sector, you've got to have a board.
Okay.
The community owns the ministry. You don't.
Oh,
right? If you do really well, you don't get more money. Right? I mean, you're giving up your equity for the ministry. I mean, I grew the food bank into, what is it today? Probably a $60 million company.
Wow.
With 150 staff and logistics. And I also helped start food banking, all over the country. I started food banks from North Carolina to Florida. I've helped start food banks in Israel and Turkey and Russia, Brazil and Argentina. This concept works everywhere.
How did you become so well? How did Atlanta's food bank become so well known that you became that sort of go-to guy?
Well, when you're in Atlanta,
that didn't happen in the late '80s because you were broke. All right, it didn't work. When did it finally hit where people went, "Oh, food and the hungry"? You got to go to Atlanta and see this Bill Bolling dude.
Well, they were happening all around the country. I mean, There was maybe a half a dozen of us who somehow found each other with similar ideas, not the same idea. I was the only one coming out of ministry. Most people got into food bank because of the environment, the waste. But the idea, centralized acquisition, decentralized distribution, we figured that out, and we created a thing called Second Harvest. The corners of the field. It became Feeding America, which is a big brand today. But Charlie, and this is something for entrepreneurs to listen to. You may be clear on your idea. You may be executing the plan perfectly well. You may be meeting all your goals, right? All your strategic plans. And you look around and say, why didn't anybody get this? Like, man, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Why didn't people get this? Maybe I was about 6-7 years into the food bank, and I'd helped start other food banks, and I know we're one of the best. And I'm looking around thinking, why didn't anybody get this? This is the best idea in town. That's where it's hard to tell young entrepreneurs to be patient. That you've got to wait for your time, and you've got to execute until that time comes. And then
what do you mean wait for your time and execute until that time comes? What is that?
Well, you got to execute until you got a track record. So you can point to an idea, but ideas are a dime a dozen. You got to point to something. You had an idea, you put it together, you got the investors, and you actually produced what you said you were going to produce, and you all got to show that you can change too, right? That it keeps evolving.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, you're probably not going to be successful. And that's not nonprofit or for profit or church or what. That principle I think is true everywhere.
I agree with that.
Now, jump into the end, Charlie, because the way you asked that question, I'll tell this story. So I'm leaving the food bank after 36 years. And the food bank was a platform for me. I mean, I was not enamored with logistics. I was enamored with the tool that we were giving to people, right? We also did affordable housing, school supplies, gardening and farming. I mean, I had all kind of business. I probably had 10 businesses under the auspices of the food bank because I'm an entrepreneur.
I didn't know.
So, well, yeah. So I'm leaving the food bank, and I'm Bill Bolling. I'm this iconic figure in town, and everybody, our society always holds people up as some kind of genius people. And first thing you have to say is, where was your strength? Where did it come from, and how did you sustain it? And for me, that's where I can tell a God story. Because it wasn't me, it came through me. Now, I worked harder than anybody. I had creative ideas. But as I tell young people, I don't care how hard you work or how good your idea is, you will run into a time of uncertainty or failure, and you got to know where what I call the well. You've got to go back to that place that gave you strength when you started. Right? That's where it comes from.
Right.
And I'm just convinced. I mean, there's some ungodly people that are successful out there, but I think mostly you've got to have the strength to sustain. To your question, what about failure? Now, failure's great. Doesn't feel good, but if you learn from it, failure's good, right?
Yep.
So I'm getting to the end of the food bank. You go around town, you get all the awards, and it's very embarrassing because nobody does anything alone. I built great teams. So half these ideas weren't even my ideas, Charlie. I mean, you just see people see ideas and bring them in and make them happen.
I mean, after all, you've been at it for 36 years, right? I mean, it can't be just you. It has to be all these people that came together.
I tell you,
now here, they want to give an award, and I'm getting the credit for it, right?
It's embarrassing.
I can imagine.
But anytime you do that, it gives you an opportunity to tell a story, right? To tell them how it really works. So that's the opportunity for an award, is you get to speak and to set the record straight. But here's the story. My staff had made up about 4 pages of accomplishments, right? And at the top of the page was 500 million pounds. 500 million pounds of food in my tenure. That's a lot, right? That's 500 million pounds we've done. And real measurement, not guesses, right?
And think about the average that person, that one of these partners takes away on one of their trips to the food bank is how many pounds?
Well, a meal's about 1.5 pounds, right? So you're looking, there's a lot.
500 million pounds divided by a pound and a half. How many meals was that? Go ahead. I'm just trying to put it in perspective.
A lot of people yeah. So I've been writing this newsletter for all these years, and you have to write in 800 or 1,200 words. You know
right.
this. You write a blog. Easy to write 5,000, hard to write 800. But and then a broad audience, right? So you got to. And I was actually looking forward to not doing that thing anymore. So I'm down to my last article, and I'm retired, and we've done all the celebrations, and I just wasn't feeling it, Charlie.
Huh.
It just felt kind of empty because it wasn't me. It was God working through me. It was surrounding myself with great people. It was being willing to take risks, all those things. And here's what I came up with. And this is just really from my heart. I would take credit for being faithful. That's it. That's my only measurement. Not how many pounds, not how many agencies, not how many food banks around the world I helped with. I stayed faithful to my call.
Mm.
And I hope to continue to do that. I've started, around urban agriculture. I've got another whole organization helping urban farmers and community gardens. I've just started a civic journalism nonprofit because as we lose newspapers and journalism, we're not going to be able to sustain a democracy. I mean, people are going and finding out all their crazy information. There's no Walter Cronkite or anybody that we trust anymore. So I'm very keen on saving our democracy. And I bought this building. I mentor a lot of young leaders in town.
Did you ever get to where you talk about, I love that, where you say, if I should get credit for anything, it's this one thing, that I remain faithful to my calling through my life. And I think that's wonderful. Did you ever have a point or points, maybe it's multiple points, where you said, why am I breaking my pick here? Isn't there something else I can be doing that's bigger, more impactful, or, I'm just tired. Okay. I just need a break. Okay. I mean, it's really hard to remain faithful to one's calling.
It is.
Yeah.
No, yeah. There's a lot of dark days. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of times you look around and say, why nobody's following me?
Right. That's what I mean. It's like, am I the wrong thing? Am I in the wrong place? Did I not hear God properly? Should I be doing something else? Do you have one of those sort of points in your life that you can think back to and tell me what?
Well, if we don't have those, we're not listening, Charlie. I mean, that you could be a narcissist and get a lot done, but that's narcissists finally run out.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That self-centeredness. So, sure. And one of the things I did was I started probably a dozen nonprofits under the auspices of the food bank.
Yeah.
So, for instance, in the mid 80s, 1984, we were going through a recession, tough time, and affordable housing, because I still work around homeless issues.
Yeah.
And that's an issue of not just housing, but supportive housing, of support. Mostly people are homeless or mentally ill, or they've had damage in their life somehow, or made wrong choice. A lot of reasons.
Reasons but they can't get their feet under them. Right. Yeah.
They didn't have a grandfather like mine. There's so many reasons that people would end up there. But they're just as precious in God's eyes as a successful person.
Say that
in God's eyes. This broken person is just as successful in God's eyes. Just not successful, but just as important to God as a successful person is.
Okay.
Right? So when you realize that, and I learned this early on in working with the homeless, I developed, this sounds a little far out too, Charlie, but I developed this like intuition. It's like seeing auras. I developed an intuition to see beyond what you were presenting me. I could see a broken down person, but I could see behind that.
Huh.
That's like the gift of sight that God may give you. And if you can see that, then what's presented doesn't stump you, or you don't. You can actually see more into the soul of that person.
Yeah.
Now, I know this sounds a little out there, but
no, I think this is wonderful. I think this is great. Go ahead.
Well, it also works when you're meeting with the CEO of Coca-Cola. It works with anybody because you can intuit a person. It helps you to know what to say to them. A lot of times you just need to listen. A lot of times you just need to set a situation for them to tell your story and why they want to help you. It's not to make them help you. They want to help you. They just might not know it yet. You're going to help them find that out.
Yeah.
And that's more of seeing every. Well, here's a basic value, a basic core for me. And everything else works from there. And it is that life is sacred. And if you believe that, it will inform how you treat people, nature, relationships. Doesn't mean you like everybody. Doesn't mean you agree with everybody. I mean, hell, you can argue with, but beyond that, you go deeper and you realize that God made all this. And I don't know why God trusted us. It's like, I'm not sure about that decision. I mean, we're a pretty big mess right now. God did create us and trusted us, empowered us. And if that's true, then we carry that opportunity and that responsibility in every interaction.
When did you realize that?
And this helps you in any business. It helps you in any relationship. It helps you in any marriage.
But when did you realize that you had that ability to intuit, to truly understand the person?
Well, when I realized I had it was later, but when I started doing it was in the 70s, working on the streets.
I realized that, but there came a point where you came to realize that you actually had it. And do you remember when that came about? And then how did that change how you exercise that, in fact, spiritual power, I would call it?
What it does when you have that is it gives you confidence. And if you approach, you're going out to make a sales call, or you're trying to sell your idea, or you're trying to get investors, right? 90% is showing up confident. And people can see through if it's a facade of confidence or whether it is confidence. Doesn't mean you're right. Doesn't even mean your idea is good.
But if I'm homeless or if I'm hungry, if I'm on the street, whatever, and I talk to Bill Bolling, I'm going to have a different experience with Bill Bolling than I am with, let's say Charlie Paparelli. I mean, what is that experience? What am I going to, what's that experience going to be like for me with Bill Bolling as being that homeless person? How will I walk away? I know what I'm walking in with. Okay, probably not trusting another guy that's sort of this nonprofit guy wants to help everybody and all that. What do I walk away with? I walk away and I go, whoa, there's a transformation that takes place in that kind of encounter. What is it?
Well, let's be careful. I don't want to make this sound like some magic trick or something.
Oh, no. I hope people don't take it as that, because I'm not trying to present it as that. Okay.
Yeah. People know, they'll know in their heart, unless, there's mental illness or whatever, but people will know that they're being treated with dignity. I mean, that's it. Most of us are longing for that. We're longing.
Thinking about this, and I was thinking, I probably walk away realizing that my life is sacred, that I do have something. I know how I'm treated on the street, okay? And I know how I've become sort of judgmental from the other side, right? And I got to realize that it's really, I am created in God's image and I am sacred. And how do I proceed from here, right? I guess and to have somebody talk to me and treat me as though I am sacred like that my life is sacred, that would be transformational. That would be transformational.
Can't you feel that from some people and not others?
Oh, baby.
Well, the homeless guy can feel it 10 times more than you.
I bet that's true.
Yeah.
So,
and
Bill,
it's my, so you're walking down the street and somebody's hitting you up for money. It's not, I feel guilty, let me give you a few dollars. I can say, no, I don't give money on the street. Tell me your story. I mean, and they'll realize that I'm sincere. I'm going to stop and listen. Right? It's just a little click that's different. And a lot of people have never been felt respected in that way. I mean, it certainly is around race and increasingly around, sex abuse and or urban and suburban. The politics is we have to always find an enemy. It's like if we spent more time getting people vaccinated and figuring out whether it was India or China that started this damn thing, let's just get through it. Don't worry about that, because that was created by God too, and God's depending on us to be smart enough to.
This is off our subject, and so I don't want to go deep in this, but it was a real surprise to me and a disappointment that I thought when this pandemic hit, and I'm talking back in March of 2020, I remember saying to myself, this is awful, but this finally gives us a common enemy. This will bring our nation, maybe the world, together. And it didn't.
And it did.
I just was shocked by that, just shocked by that.
And if that won't do it, for basic health and survival, God has an idea to wipe a bunch of us out and start over. I mean, what it looks like, because I do wake up, guys. This is, and we're into conspiracies and politics, and you can't make me do that. It's like, I'm all for free choice, but it's affecting the rest of us. Grandma's going to die if we keep doing this. So
unbelievable.
I don't know. I'm not a political person.
I know. I'm trying to stay away from all that too. All it does is mess me up. It doesn't. But one of the things that I'm struggling with, you can help me with this too, is, you go through, you were serving the hungry, you're serving these partners who are serving the hungry, right? You're actually serving also these people that you were collecting food from, right? I mean, that was a huge impact there. Okay.
Very important to remember that. This is win-win.
Right. All the way around.
I call it a good business proposition.
How do you get to the point here is they say, look, you're doing this 36 years. It's, you say, it's time to retire. Why don't you just say, I've kind of done my bit. It's time to relax, just maybe advise here or there, but not to create anything. I don't want to get deeper. I don't want to get entangled. I don't want due dates. I don't want responsibilities, How come that didn't happen to you?
Have you been talking to my wife, Charlie?
What?
Have you been talking to my wife?
Why hasn't that? Why didn't it? Doesn't seem to have happened to you. You said, well, since I've retired, I started 2 other nonprofits, right? So how come? Don't you ever think about this? Or your wife sits down and says, Bill, enough is enough. We've done good. God has been good. We've been true to we've been faithful to this calling. Take a break, man. Why? What happened? How do you think about that?
I don't divide life between work and break. It's life. Now, I would encourage everybody that if you're going to do this for the long term, you got to take care of your body and your heart and your soul.
Okay.
Or you won't last. You'll get cynical. And cynical it gets you into inaction, right? The opposite of cynicism is not optimism. It is action. Action gets you out of cynicism. But I don't divide life between work and pleasure, right? That being said, you need to take care of you. You need to exercise. You need to have a relationship with God. You need to figure out prayer, meditation. You need to do those things, eat right, but you don't have to be fanatic about it. You just need to fuel up.
Part of what I call the spiritual disciplines, including eating right and health and all of yeah, right. I agree with that.
But here's something, Charlie. Real freedom is not having a choice. And then you're free.
Okay. Explain that.
I hate to go to the grocery store and there's 15 kind of ketchups. Just give me a bottle of ketchup, right? So in the sense of being free is you're clear about your purpose. You're clear about kind of your methodology. I'm going to do this in the context of community. I'm not going to do it by myself. I'm very clear about the culture that I need to create to sustain. So, you get clarity on all that. You got to learn that. But the real freedom is I'm not clear that God wants me to keep doing this. No. You're free when you know you have no choice. God called you to this.
Right.
And sure, I need a vacation. I need to take care of myself, but I don't need to stop and retire. I was put here for a purpose. I'm living a purpose-driven life. So the purpose doesn't change because I'm 74 years old. You just, the purpose gets clearer, quite frankly.
And you haven't gotten to that point of questioning that purpose. You've just accepted it and parked it, and that's it. You're on that purpose. I never question it. That's because that's what gets you wrapped around the axle. You start questioning your purpose after you've been doing it for 40 years.
Now, let's be clear. Your role can change.
Okay.
But not your purpose.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Your role changes in different stages of your life. Like, you get married and start having a family. You need to be a household. You need to take care of your family. You need to raise those children. Grandchildren come. You need to then be the grandpa.
Yeah.
But roles change. But if somehow you were blessed with clarity around your purpose, what am I on earth for? Then that doesn't change for me. I changed venues. Like I was telling you the story in '84, I started having people come to the food bank. I had to fight my board on this. And we started a housing forum, right?
A housing?
It's the place housing forum, affordable housing forum.
Okay.
Okay. I think 6 people came to the first meeting. And we started meeting every month. Every month for 20 years at the food bank. 7:30 a.m. people would come to 9 o'clock. And it wasn't an organization. It didn't have a budget, didn't have a mission. Bill Bolling is inviting you, and it's back when we used to drink coffee and eat Krispy Kreme. We don't do that anymore. But you could get a sugar high and a caffeine high, and we would talk about affordable housing. That role of convening and facilitating and creating safe place, it's safe to talk about hard things in this room. Last Wednesday, I had 300 people come to the Affordable Housing Forum. It's still going 35 years later. And people have come to me and say, I'll give you money and hire an ED, or I'll give you, and it's like, yeah, you go do that. I'm just convening and facilitating a conversation. But out of that, the State Housing Trust Fund, they didn't have any money in the game. The Land Bank Authority, the ANDP, all trusts, but all these things came out of that conversation. Not in our name. When they write up the history, nobody will even mention the housing forum. It's fine. In fact, it's better.
It's interesting that you started this conversation with that you knew that you had this social network, right? How did you put it? This is when, before I was retiring, I realized I had this network. What'd you call it?
The social capital.
Capital.
The social capital, which
and
part of it is network.
Right. And what you've done is you're showing me here with this housing forum that you're talking about here, right, is how you used it. It took Bill Bolling to, you see this idea, and it took Bill Bolling to make those first few calls that people said, if Bill says I should be there, I'm going to be there.
Well, anybody could have done it, Charlie. I did it, but anybody could have done it.
I think that's part of that's the stickiness that you have, and that's part of the capital that you now have that you didn't have 40 years ago.
No, I didn't. No, I was just kid wandering around, with ideas.
And that's really because I think I have some of that. And I need to make sure that I don't just squander it, because it's easy to squander. If you just let it go fallow, you can. That's great. That's really helpful.
You got to use it.
Thank
you.
You
really got to use it. Yeah, because you're right. It's like a muscle. It's like anything else. You got to use it. It'll grow. It'll get better. You bring more people into the circle. I love that. And then you just trust God. I'm doing my part. See what happens. Okay?
All right.
That's all
You
we're called to do. We're good. We're
You
just
said to
called
me
to do.
multiple times when we talked about this having this interview, which I'm so glad we did. You said, "There's no way that we're going to talk for 2 hours." Okay, we have
It's
talked
been
for
2
over
hours.
2 hours. Okay, and I know that we've got even more to talk about, but we're going to end it here. And I want to tell you this whole idea. You said a couple things that just really struck me. One was that the food bank was owned by this nonprofit, this food bank was really owned by the community. It wasn't mine.
Yeah.
I thought that was, I never thought of nonprofits or community organizations. We call them that, but I never thought of them as owned by the community. I mean, if the founders would think that way, that's transformative in and of itself. And then this other piece that says, I'm so embarrassed.
And even deeper than that, Charlie, who owns the community? There's this God force that owns that. So let's be clear. There's always another owner up the line here.
There is another owner. And then that piece you said that, I get these, as I've gotten later in my career, I've gotten more and more awards, if you will, recognition. And it became more and more embarrassing until you came to the point where what I'm thanking people for is, if you're going to thank me or award me with anything, it's for I was faithful to my calling. And I just think that was just beautiful.
Well, not every audience would quite get that, but you have to speak to the audience you're in front of. But you always have to say, we do this in the context of community. Like in starting the food bank, because I had worked in the church for 6 years, I created a model that couldn't work without volunteers. It wasn't an add-on. How many times we go and volunteer and you get to church and say, sit down over there, we'll find you something to do. It doesn't have a food bank, I'll tell you that, because I know your name before you get there. You're gonna get 2 movies, a lecture, and I've got your information. I'm gonna follow you out the door because they become the marketing team. But if the volunteers don't show up, the work doesn't get done, and you feel that when you're there. So you've got to create a model that depends on the community. It doesn't work without it.
So you've really fully embraced that every job, this Ritz-Carlton deal, which is every job has to understand, even a volunteer has to understand how they're contributing to the overall mission. Okay.
You burn out otherwise, or you move on, or whatever. I had people work with me for 25 years.
Otherwise, it's just doing a good thing, right? And there's a lot of places to do good things, right? I'm with you. I love that. Well, I'm going to end this and let you get back to your wife. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.
Great conversation, Charlie.
This is a great conversation. I always like spending the time with you. It's such a gift from God for me. Thank you so much, Bill. Well, I'm going to close this out, and then I'll say goodbye to you real quick. Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you for attending this conversation with Bill Bolling, of the founder of the Atlanta Community Food Bank. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it. There's so many lessons in here for entrepreneurs. So again, subscribe at paparelli.com. But in the meantime, you have good hunting with your entrepreneurship and building your companies. I hope you do well. Surround yourself with great people and have them be on mission. Thank you.